Greetings, my brothers and sisters. Sending gratitude to all of you who are joining in today to accompany us down the rabbit hole of self-exploration through plant medicines. My name is Ryan Sprague, and I'm here to tell you that your frequency is now set and tuned to explore psychedelic medicines and the impact they've made among the countless psychonauts exploring the last true frontier. Buy a ticket and take the ride with me as we get true first-hand accounts of the experiences, benefits, risks, and transformations taking place within the ever-expanding world of psychedelic medicines on This One Time on Psychedelics. As I have often talked about on the show, connecting with plant medicines and psychedelics alike without the necessary step of integration is synonymous with the idea of asking someone for directions and then ignoring the directions they give to you. Without integration, we are unable to fully receive the messages our PEAK peak experiences with these medicines have the opportunity to give us. And as a result, we risk missing out on the gems of wisdom that could potentially help us change our day-to-day sober realities long after our peak experiences with these plants have concluded. Today's guest on the show is someone who is connected with plant medicines and psychedelics alike while simultaneously employing and focusing upon the concept of integration within her experiences. And as a result, has not only been able to have profound shifts in her life, but has also been able to quote unquote hang up the phone, as Terence McKenna famously stated, enter sobriety in her life and use that sobriety as the ultimate tool to allow for further integration of all of the plant medicine and psychedelic experiences she has had within her life. She is the host of The Amy Edwards Show, which is a show dedicated to helping its listeners transform their lives and become their best and most rocking versions of themselves through more efficient and effective habits, mindset shifts, and radical honesty. She is also a radio personality, a mother, a rock and roll musician who has released a total of 5 albums as a solo artist. And if all of that wasn't enough, she is also the author of 2 books. And in today's show, we will be exploring her experiences with psychedelics, what her major downloads and insights have been within these medicines, her favorite integration practices, her experience with sobriety as a psychedelic experience in and of itself, and much, much more. So please give me a big hand in welcoming Amy Edwards to the show. Amy, what's up?
Oh, what's up, Ryan? You always give the most beautiful intros. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'm just honored to be here.
It's so much fun. You know, when we did Highly Optimized and your show when I was in Austin, you know, we were immediately like, let's do round 3 on This One Time with Psychedelics. And so it's so great to come to fruition because, you know, I really think, like I said in the intro, there's such a profound and potent aspect to sobriety that people don't often relate to the psychedelic space, right? Because for me, I take these breaks from most psychedelics. I only do about twice per year when it comes to psilocybin or something. But even with cannabis, which is the thing I use most regularly, you know, I take breaks for 5 days every week to make sure that like in that integration time period of sobriety, I'm actually able to like get the messages that cannabis may have been showing me over the weekend when I was sitting with her in ceremony. And so it's those times of reflection, those times of absence that we truly discover not only what aspects of ourselves are looking to come forth, but also what we really love about psychedelics and what they really do for us. Because if we use something, you know, very regularly, we're going to forget what it really does for us. And so I'm really excited to dive into this. And what I would love to start with is kind of like an overview of, you know, how you got into psychedelics, you know, because you're in rock and roll, you do a lot of cool stuff. And so I'm curious, you know, to hear about how this journey started with you. And then from there, we can move into, you know, what sobriety did and everything like that as well.
Oh, well, thank you. Yes. Sobriety. I'm glad we're discussing that because you said it so well when you were on my show, which I would encourage everyone to listen to. It's so good. And you talked about life as a psychedelic experience. And that is the goal. That is the goal, not just to be in a state that's not truly ourselves. And so that's been a huge lesson for me. And my psychedelic experience goes way back and it's very unconscious. You know, it's like late 80s, early 90s, college. I went to college right when grunge started, and we did acid, we did, you know, mushrooms and all those things, but there was nothing conscious about it. I wasn't doing it in a ceremonial way. So doing it in a ceremonial way was a whole different thing to me. And I feel like that had such a surgence. It's not even I don't know, maybe it's a resurgence. I don't know. But anyway, it just it's having a moment in the last few years. And now we're all like, oh, we can do this in a ceremonial way, like people have done for thousands and thousands of years, and really get something out of it rather than just have a good time and laugh our asses off, which is what I had done in the past. Right. Yeah. So I would say even doing it back then, though, I have always harbored some fear around psychedelics. And so you're nodding your head. Do you feel that? Do you get
Oh,
fearful?
yeah. I think it's honestly, I wrote down a note just then because this is something I like to talk about a lot, where I think it's healthy to have a good amount of fear surrounding these medicines, right? Because it's never the people that are a little nervous, that are like, hey, I'm not really sure what's going to happen. I have some questions. It's not those people I worry about. It's the people that are on the other side. Like, this is nothing. I can handle anything. I'm not worried about this. What's a couple of plants? Those are the people that end up having an ordeal instead of an experience. So yeah, I love the concept of fear in this for sure.
Yeah. And I've really seen that, like with my partner, Justin, he is an addict. And so his attitude toward them was always like, more. I'm an elephant. I can take anything. And I was like, oh my God, and so, but my personal experience has always been really, I'm actually a little more extreme than just asking a few questions. I don't necessarily ask the questions. Instead, I just think, well, this is it. I'm going to be committed to, an institution after this. I'm probably going to lose my mind. And I cry a lot. I get really, really nervous and really, really scared. And yet I do it anyway. I'll take it anyway. I'll take the hero dose and I'll do it because ultimately experience has taught me that I come out for the better. Like overcoming that fear initially is very good for me. And so I think that my most recent psychedelic journey started with Bufo. And that was the one that came to me, and somebody said, it was practitioners I trusted, and said, we'll do a ceremony. You can drive home afterward. It didn't take, I have 2 kids, so it didn't take a lot of time. 3 days is a lot for me to commit to for a psychedelic experience where you need to integrate after and sleep and all that, because I have to take care of my children.
Yeah.
And so for people that are looking for something that's extremely impactful and I'm talking for months afterwards, I would say Bufo is a great place to start. And so that was a big start in recent years. And that was in the end of 2018, which had been a very hard year for me. And so that was when I really got conscious about psychedelics and started to have those experiences.
That's so powerful. And, it's so cool because I've interacted with Bufo a couple of times, and yeah, it's funny. It kind of gets this name, like the businessman psychedelic, because I actually had a friend who was a lawyer and loved 5-MeO DMT and NN-DMT because he could come home, sit in ceremony, by himself pretty much for an hour or so, and then go cook dinner and, pretty much live an otherwise normal life. And it was shocking to me because when I first did it, I was like, wow, I get that this is short, but at the same time, like, how are you going and cooking dinner after? Like, that's amazing. There was like this time period where, of course, you're going so far out on something like Bufo, and you're essentially like, what I really believe is happening there is we're experiencing what happens after we die and after we transition, where it's the most challenging part of any psychedelic I found with regards to fear is the losing of the ego, because once you're past that, you're past the concept of fear, right? But, I found that with Bufo, I think that healthy amount of fear I have is more than with any other medicine. With psilocybin, I get a little butterflies. If I'm doing a larger dose, maybe a little more butterflies. With LSD, I kind of know that every experience I have with LSD is probably going to be different or more than I imagine because it just happens every time. So I'm used to that. But with Bufo, okay, you're about to literally lose every concept of what you know to be yourself possible. And so it's fascinating, what happens to me leading up to that experience. Like when I'm laying on the floor and they're about to pass me the pipe, my heart's just like beating so hard because it knows something's about to happen. And so I usually in those times just remind myself like, hey, you're taking a medicine. The medicine's going to work exactly the way that it's supposed to work. You have people around you that are trained. They're amazing facilitators and practitioners. You have the right set and setting going into it. And so I remind myself of all the things that allow me to feel more comfortable, because I think that if we don't do that lead-in work, whatever that is, that kind of like pre-integration work, right? Because the integration work is kind of seen as like what you do afterwards, but there's also like a preload that you do, right? And I know these terms from substances like MDMA, it really helps to have this preload and postload of certain supplements. And so I guess the way I would frame it is like this preload of like, integration to be able to ask yourself like, okay, what is my intention here? How will I know if these goals or this intention is actually manifested? What are some anchors that I can have so that as I start to leave my body, I can grasp for those anchors and know that like everything that's happening is what is supposed to be happening. And then as soon as I start to be able to touch ground again, those are the things that will come back into my consciousness the first, right? Like, okay, intention, how did that play out? What do I relate to that? Because I think that if we don't have those anchors, then we can get disintegrated into the unknown. And I think that's where a lot of like the excess fear can stem from.
Oh, you're so right. You're so good at putting terms on things.
Oh, thank you.
I like preload. I like preload. That's really, I do that. And, the journey, the Bufo, it led me into doing a series of ketamine infusions that were in a clinic. And I mean, it just was one of those things that just happened, right? And so I was led to that. But as I did those, I realized how important that preload was because I could get really scared in an intense ketamine infusion, which those are over fairly quickly too. But I noticed that I had to make sure I was listening to the right music because a lot of people listen to binaural beats, but I found those scary. And so, and just any dark sound could make me feel fearful. And I didn't want to feel fearful in those moments. I wanted to be able to surrender. And so my main preload, if anybody's looking for one, or if it feels complicated, the one that I use is, you are safe. I am safe. And I would just repeat that. And in the ketamine infusions, I made my own meditations that I listened to in there, and interspersed throughout it with my own voice, I'm telling myself, I am safe. I'm telling myself, hey, you are safe. And that was a really great anchor and a really great preload for me because I knew I was safe. I just had to surrender to that. And so many times we can lose sight of like, oh my God, am I breathing? Is anybody watching me? Am I okay? And you are safe. And so if you like, that's been my biggest reminder. And I think if people have an opportunity to tell themselves that in their own voice, I mean, I consider myself a voice manifester. I'm all about using your voice to your advantage. And so you can use your phone now and, make yourself something that tells you you're safe. Your pre-version, yourself, your future self, your old self, whatever you want to do, your disembodied voice can tell you you're safe. And that not only makes you feel safe, but it fosters trust, self-trust, which is so crucial for our lives. And anytime we can do something to enhance our own self-trust, that is really huge. And so that's been a big one for me, like the double impact of telling myself that I am safe and creating my own meditations, which I know a lot of people probably might shy away from, but you really can even on your phone these days.
Hey, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the show. I wanted to take a quick moment to let you all know that the doors are officially open for the Conscious Cannabis Collective. And as such, this is the last week you can sign up and receive all of the bonuses we're currently including. This is the last time I will be personally onboarding those of you who sign up with a complimentary one-on-one session, and you'll have the ability to get the Grow with Cannabis course for free during this limited time. For more info on how you can take advantage of this offer, head down to the show notes for this episode and secure your spot today, as we only have so many spots left and they are filling up quickly. Now back to the show. I mean, it's fascinating. And, I'm really glad you brought this up because I'm going to lay out a concept that I've never laid out in an episode yet. I don't think I've actually put this out anywhere. It's a idea that I've been working on for a while because cool. I was doing it, kind of as a natural reflex. And then I realized like, oh, this might actually really help someone out. And so it goes off of the same basis you were talking about, I'm a projector. So in human design, like I use my throat chakra as my main source of power, just like yourself. Right. And so for people like us that really resonate with voice, for me, one of the things I tell myself that allows me to get out of a lot of fear and a lot of like the potential challenges within a psychedelic experience, and this includes cannabis too, is that, specifically with cannabis, because that's the one, again, I interact with most commonly, we hear paranoia, anxiety, those kind of things. So what I actually think like paranoia or anxiety are within the plant medicine space is that you are in an altered state of mind and you are trying to think about sober reality with an altered mind. And so what I normally tell myself, if I start finding myself in a loop of something that I really don't need to be thinking about, I'll say, hey, that's sober Ryan's job. This is not our job to think about that, right? Like sober Ryan's got this all figured out. Whatever I'm nervous about or, like paranoid about or anything like that starts happening, I go, hey, that's sober Ryan's job. He's got that, that paradigm all figured out. Let's focus on where we're at. And so I love that because one of the things that I say to myself is you took a medicine and the medicine is working. A lot of times when, I've been facilitating cannabis ceremonies for people and they start to get a little challenged, I remind them like, hey, you took a medicine and the sober version of you was completely okay with this. And that was the version of you that has all its faculties in check, right? Like the time to evaluate whether you made a right or wrong decision is not when you're in an altered state of mind. Like that's what the preload's for, right? To ensure that you have the right set, you have the right setting, you're in the right, frame of mind, all of these kind of things to allow you to have that peace of mind while you're in the experience. And so, I love that you brought that up because that's something I do all the time. Is like, is this a job for high Ryan or is this a job for sober Ryan? And if so, we know sober Ryan's got all his stuff done, right? Like he made sure he got all his stuff done. He took the right supplements. He made sure he was down regulated before he got into the experience. He made sure he was in the right setting. So you got nothing to worry about, right? So I kind of think of my sober, version of myself as my parent. And then I'm like the child in the experience where I'm like, is this okay? It's like, don't worry. Your parents got you covered. They wouldn't have put you in any situation that was dangerous. So you got to figure it out. So I love that you brought that up.
I like thinking of it like that. I do that too. Like I'll have a pre-thing where I'm like, I'll remind myself, look, you got everything handled. So you're safe to relax. It's all okay. And then like, it's so confusing when you're in there and you're like, oh my God, I need to think about this and this, and is this okay? And you're just like, oh God, stop. So, the more you can have those experiences though, you learn to really stay conscious about your preload. So I love it. I love it.
And it's cool because it frees you, from the confines of trying to think about, normal reality while you're in an altered state of mind and allows you to be like, okay, that's not my job, but what is my job? What do I choose my job to be or my mission, my purpose, whatever, while I'm in this experience? Well, for me, I'm all about curiosity, imagination, and wonder and awe, right? Like the states of a mind of a child. And so for me, it's like, okay, let me go look at something as if it's the first time I'm looking at it. Let me think about something as it's the first time I'm thinking about it. Let me listen to a song as if it's the first time I'm really hearing it. And ask myself, like, if I was a beginner here, right? If this is the first time I was doing this, listening to this, thinking this thought, etc., how might I reframe it as if it's the new first impression of said thing? And so, like, a lot of times what I've realized is that, when we think about happiness, sadness, any emotion, any experience we've had, right? We have this first impression, right? Which is like kind of synonymous with like the peak experience we've had within that certain state of awareness. So with me, there's like a certain memory I have that I imagine is the most happy I've ever felt to that point. But what's to say that I'm not a second away from having a memory that completely trumps that one and allows me to have a whole newfound basis on what happiness means to me, what it is, how it operates in my life. And so when I go into these experiences, that's what I'm there to do primarily, is to focus usually on one aspect, like an emotion, a thought, business. I do a lot of, psychedelic experiences with a business intention of like, hey, what am I missing in my program? What would be a cool thing to figure out? Like this weekend, I actually sat with cannabis and, it was funny. I was going to watch this show, Ancient Civilizations on Gaia, which I love nerding out on and just getting into this altered state of mind and watching. But, I went to go turn on the TV. TV was being finicky. So I was like, okay, cool. That's a sign from, myself, my higher self, the universe, whatever you want to say, that, hey, probably TV is not the best thing right now, right? You can benefit even greater from something else. So then I've been getting this clue over and over, this download over and over, like start doing some ohms with cannabis, start seeing what realm that opens up. And so I ended up sitting with an ohm meditation completely in darkness. And I ended up ohming for 20 minutes. And after about 10 or 15 minutes, I lost myself in the ohms. Like I was in a dreamland. And after that, I allowed my heart to guide me into some breath work. And so then I put on this 528 hertz healing frequency that is my favorite one. And it's weird because this frequency has followed me throughout life. where, if you go on YouTube, there's a lot of different 528 hertz, videos out there you can watch. But there's this one that doesn't come up as number one or number two. It's like down on the first page, almost on the second page, but it's the best one ever. And it's my number one track that leads me through every like psilocybin journey I have, anything where I'm going to be meditating most of the time. And it's funny because I was listening.
Put it in the show notes.
I will. Yeah. It's an amazing thing to guide you through because it's just so beautiful. Like I can't wait for you to hear it because you'll love it.
Yeah.
But it was funny because I was listening to my buddy Shirveen from Symbiotica do a live, and he had it on in the background. And I'm like, dude, no way, right? So then I go to see a new acupuncturist and I walk into her office. It's playing on YouTube. I'm like, are you kidding me?
Wow.
So I get into that. I do some breath work. And then I'm having these insanely transcendental experiences. And then after that, I feel myself start tremoring. So then I lay down and do, allow myself to just do some TRE, tension and trauma release exercise. And so then I realized, oh my God, I just figured out the workshop idea I'm going to do at the retreat that I'm co-hosting coming up. So it was like so funny because nothing in there was a plan. It was just kind of like follow my heart into what feels right. And it led me into this beautiful creation that now I'm like, wow, I'm so excited to actually eventually record this and make a guided meditation for the people in Connect with Cannabis. And so it's so fun allowing your heart to guide you and allowing these experiences to really allow you to reimagine like what is following your heart? What is happiness? Like what is anything I think I know already? How can I unlearn everything I think I know about it and reintegrate something completely new and as if I'm in the mind of a child? It's so rad.
Yeah, it's so rad.
Yeah.
I have one that I pulled from YouTube, a 528 audio. So I wonder if it's the same one.
It would be hilarious if it was the same one. Like that would be the ultimate cool synchronicity. And I wouldn't even doubt that it would be the same one because, it's funny, like, there's something about that one where I've heard like, YouTube kind of like compresses audio, things like that. But that one, like, especially like, when you're in a sober state of mind, like you just know like, oh, that one feels nice, right? Like when you're on like a hero's dose of psilocybin or something like that, and you're going through YouTube and you're like, no. And then you're like, whoa, that one's doing something like that's, again, it reintegrated and allowed me to realize how powerful and potent that thing is. And so now whenever I'm in any medicine ceremony and, people are looking to kind of meditate and be on a guided journey through it, I always put that on in the background as I'm speaking and guiding people because it's so much fun. And, I think that, really if our bodies are a collection of tuning forks, then, 528, of course, there's a lot of science out about it, but there's something just profound that's beyond the science that happens, like the direct experience of it when I'm listening to it, that has just drawn me in time after time. I mean, it's so much fun.
That's so cool. I'm glad you shared that. I can't wait. Yeah. I'm going to start using that more. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's funny because when I had come to see you, we spoke about ketamine, but I had yet to try it. Well, I actually got the opportunity to try it recently. And I did what I would probably describe as a microdose. I mean, I went extremely light into it.
How did you do it?
It was a nasal spray. And so with oxytocin. And so I like, from what I understand, of course, like, IV injection is going to be the most like fast onset type way. But for this, I probably took somewhere between 20 and 30 milligrams, like a very low dose. But I was very surprised in what it did, because for me, it kind of just felt like an exacerbated version of cannabis, where cannabis is a mild dissociative. And actually, it was in using a product from my buddies who run a biohacking company that I realized, because it had something in there that's really similar to ketamine, that's a dissociative. When I took that, I was like, oh, this feels a lot like cannabis. And so it actually allowed me to see cannabis in a whole new way of this mild dissociative. And so when I tried ketamine, it was very similar to cannabis with the giggles, with that feeling of being outside of yourself, but it wasn't so far outside of yourself like I imagine happens in the higher doses, where I felt like actually separate from myself. It was just enough to get like, I think the transcendental part of it and allow myself to see my thoughts and see myself reflected, but not enough to really send me into like potentially like a out of body experience, which, I would definitely like to explore at some point with a facilitator, in the IV type, atmosphere,
I've done it that way, both controlled in a setting and then accidentally. I've done it accidentally. In Costa Rica last year, some friends had some powdered, and I was on a trip with a whole lot of conscious folks. And so, so we just did a little, and I'm so experienced with ketamine. So I really thought I was fine. And as soon as I took some, we were about to go in Costa Rica, we were in Tamarindo, and we were about to go to like a evening fair with like music, and then we were going to dinner afterward. And so we were all in a truck together in the back, and I took some, I knew as soon as I took it, I knew the feeling, and I guess, what they had there in Costa Rica was very strong, or
Yeah.
whatever my friend had was very strong, and everyone else was fine. But I was sitting there and I looked at my partner and I was like, I couldn't even get the words out. I was trying to say took too much and nothing made sense. Nothing made sense. And I thought, oh no. And so I managed to get those words out, took too much. And I knew I couldn't walk. I couldn't do anything. So it was not good, but he took good care of me and I just had to surrender to the moment. So we stood outside. Everyone else went to the thing. I could see it from far away, but I had to just shut my eyes and surrender. And he just held me and I entered another world. I remember it was as if it was like ancient Egypt and there were doors and panels and writing on the wall. I mean, and I was walking around and it was just really an intense experience to have right then. And most of the time, actually, really every other time I've ever had an intense psychedelic experience like that, I have been somewhat prepared mentally. And this threw me into a state of not being prepared at whatsoever. And that was very scary for me. And I really had to learn surrender in that moment and just say, this is what I'm going through right now. And I'm just going to have to do it. And I know I have someone here to support me. And I was just so grateful for him. And I was able to express to him, just thanking him. And I said all sorts of crazy things and talked about him being my husband and my eye was over here. I don't know, it was like, he said, I said, is that my eye? And but I was with such a supportive group of people too. And what a difference that makes too. I mean, finally they got me back in the car. They had to carry me back into the car. It was humbling. That's for sure. They carried me and loaded me back into the car. We went to dinner. It's all very hazy for me, but they went on in and I was in the parking lot. And I mean, it was as if I zoomed out and saw the entire world. Finally, I started to come back to myself, but I couldn't make sense of myself. And then I made it to dinner and sat down at dinner and everyone just laughed and said, oh, we've been there. One guy said he had been in a porta potty on too much ketamine at a Dave Matthews concert for 3 hours. And I was like,
Oh my God.
I know. And so everyone was just there for me. And I was able to give myself enough grace around that experience. So, ketamine is one to be careful with because if it can really take you by surprise. So I would encourage people to be with people you trust or something like that, because gosh, even just talking about it, it made me feel like, those things are still with us. I can feel a little like heady in there. So, ketamine, it can be a really intense. A nose spray, though, I think can guide you in meditation so beautifully. And I really love the nose sprays. I've had to, that's been one thing in sobriety that I've cut out. And boy, do I miss it. I have to ask myself, why do I miss it? Why do I want it so bad? A friend was just texting me. She's like, I just got one. How do I use it? Was asking my advice and I was happy to share it. But I was like, man, and hearing you talk about that, I know what that feels like. And it can be so powerful and so beautiful. And you just have a way of, it's like a mild dissociation, if that's possible. And it really can just lead you into a state of connectedness that's really incredible.
What is up, everybody? I hope you were all enjoying the show. And I wanted to stop by real quick and share a little bit about our latest podcast sponsor, Freedom Builders. Now, Freedom Builders are a team of graphic designers, website creators, videographers, social media marketing experts, and coaches that build out your custom online business from A to Z. This is a done-for-you service, which means they do the work for you while you get to put your focus back on what you love most, which is coaching your clients and bringing in sales. Now, as a former online fitness coach, Mike knows where your struggle points are and exactly how to help you overcome them. This is why he created Freedom Builders, so that you can scale your business while protecting your time and your energy. Now, you guys know that delegation is a business superpower, and you can activate this superpower today by scheduling a complimentary call with Mike at freedombuilders.com so you can start building the freedom that allows you to take your business to the next level. Alex and I recently connected with Freedom Builders for our Connect with Cannabis build out, and we could not have been happier with the results. With Mike and his team, they were able to go through an outline and create a personalized program for our experience, develop our brand identity, build and design a custom branded webpage, professionally edit our program video content, custom design all of our slide presentations, automate our email marketing sequences, create a seamless payment system for our offer, design unique infographics for our social media content, and guide us through our proven launch blueprint to generate organic leads through our social media. So if you're a coach, facilitator, or healer listening to this ad right now, and you are looking to put freedom back into your life, once again, go to freedombuilders.com and book your complimentary call today. I hope you all enjoy the rest of the show, and I'm wishing you the best day ever. It's so amazing, and thank you for sharing that story because, I think that when people hear ketamine, they kind of think like, oh, no big deal, right? But I mean, just from my small experience, I knew right away, I'm like, oh, this has the potential to send me extremely far out. And when I watched Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia on ketamine, which is a fantastic episode, I highly recommend everyone check it out. It's on Hulu. Before I decided to get into it, because I had seen ketamine for years. I've been in music festivals for years, and I'd always watch people do it. And I just, it just didn't feel like the right time. It didn't feel like the right place. It did not feel like, because I would ask like, well, how much am I going to do? They're like, well, just a small bump. And I'm like, first of all, I don't like nose drugs,
don't do it.
Yeah, exactly. Like nasal spray.
Careful.
Yeah, nasal spray is one thing, but like when people are just like kind of eyeing things out, I'm like, I'm not exactly down for that, because I want to know, what is the potential of how far out I'm going to go? Because that way I know like, hey, if it's going to be really far out, well, okay, I want to have a comfy place to lay down. I want to make sure that like I have the right music around me, the right people around me. Like, I want to make sure I'm controlling for every variable that might add.
It's called a K-hole for a reason.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a real thing. And it's funny because when I was watching Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia, they were talking about the people that, not invented it, but kind of like started really experimenting with it. And they were going upwards of like 200 to 250 milligrams, which is a very large dose when it comes
really
to,
high.
Yeah, when it comes to ketamine. And again, I did 20 or 30 probably around there. And I was completely still able to function. I didn't have to do much. I was just at my house, but like I was able to still be able to function, but I knew right away, I'm like, yeah, I mean, even walking downstairs was pretty challenging at that point. So I'm like, I was surprised that people don't talk about this stuff more frequently with regards to ketamine, because, imagining your friend at a Dave Matthews concert and having Dave Matthews' voice serenade him in a porta potty. I'm like, well, I mean, to go through that experience, I'm sure he learned on the other side of it, like, whoa, that was a lot. And, in terms of setting, I can only imagine what a porta potty is like for your setting, you know, and what that does to your set as well.
I agree. I just, the more experienced I got with ketamine, the less I thought it was a party drug, even though I've seen it since the 90s. I've seen it in that way. And so, though I would go out and bring my nose spray and just do a little, it's a nice alternative to a drink, but it doesn't enhance your conversational skills. And so if you're dancing or something, maybe a little, but even so, your motor skills aren't going to be as coordinated. It's going to take everything down and make you a lot more internal. And so I would just encourage people to maybe try something else if it's in a party setting. And my experience with ketamine, not only unintentionally and intentionally, I think I can credit it with really, really resetting my neural pathways and really being a huge part of getting me to where I am today and getting my brain reset. It has surprised me endlessly. And so I'm really grateful for those experiences. And one of the most major visions I had on it was my own voice rising up and having wings and seeing the world with everyone else's voice rising up with wings. And so I thought, that's my purpose. And so I feel like it did connect me more to what I am called to do.
Yeah. It's so interesting you say that, because in the Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia episode, the gentleman on there, I forget his name, he actually passed away after the episode. He was pretty old when the episode aired, but he was talking about how like, he's like, hey, the whole reason I interact with ketamine is to go meet angels. Like I speak with angels. And he actually went into the story about how at one point he became so close with this one angel that this angel wanted to experience life. So he allowed the angel to take over his body. And so he went into like cross-dressing and things like that because the angel was female and he's male. He was doing this I think in like something like the 70s or 80s or something like that with ketamine. And so, it
Wow.
was really interesting to watch this gentleman who was very well versed in the realm of ketamine. And I believe he was, I don't think synthesizer is the right word, but he was in some sort of production for ketamine at one point too, scientist, chemist, something like that. But he had a lot of great insights. And so when you were mentioning the wings, and I've heard a lot about this very like divine feeling with ketamine, and even with my small dose, I could feel the potential. And so I knew, I'm like, okay, this would be something I would like to try with a facilitator on an IV at a larger dose, but I want to make sure I'm in the right, setting and everything like that to do it, because I did feel that, this is going to be something that I would do for deep, deep meditation, like,
Yes.
because that's what I love. I mean, even with psilocybin, like there were years when I would take psilocybin and watch funny movies or something like that.
Mhm.
But then I remember the one experience that changed it all for me, where I did a very large tea and, again, like didn't really know what I was getting into. Figured like, oh, I've done an eighth. What's, double that, what's that going to be? It's only 3.5 more grams. And so we did this, very strong tea, not knowing that the strain we were interacting with was penis envy too. So that has a lot more psilocybin in it.
I've done
so,
it.
Yeah. And so we were trying to watch this funny show, and I was laughing so much that it was like uncomfortable. And what happened was, I don't know what happened physiologically, but something happened where I laughed. It did not sound like laughter, because it was like I couldn't even make the ha 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 sound. It was just air like ha and out of me. And it triggered this response that I was choking. And then immediately the first thoughts that came to my mind were, you ate mold and now your throat's closing up and you're going to die. And so like that all happened in a fraction of a second. I ended up trying to go to the bathroom and puke up what I had drank. It was a tea, no chance there. It was already full well absorbed into my body. And so I had this little mini freak out for 5 minutes where I thought I was going to die. I was pacing around. And then I realized after about 5 minutes, wait a minute, my throat's still completely open. I would have died already. And then at that moment, like the cosmic laughter of almost like the entity of psilocybin just laughing at me, kind of saying like, okay, we needed to check you. At least you're in the right scenario where like, you're not somewhere unsafe, like a music festival or something when you experience this, but we had to show you kind of what you were messing with so that you held reverence in the future. And so then after that, all I could do, because it was one of the only times in my life on psilocybin that I've experienced true hallucinations where like I see a wall that's not really there, like things like that. And so all I could really do was just go fall into my bed and just essentially meditate. And this is before I even meditated, on a daily practice. And so I fell into my bed and I had the most unbelievably profound experience of just traveling to different dimensions and different realms and meeting with different beings. And when I came back, I was kind of like, wow, I think this is actually the first time I really got a taste of what psilocybin can do. And so after that, that's what prompted me to get into all the inner work, all the emotional work, start learning about integration, start learning about how these medicines work in the brain, how they work on the heart, the spirit, the soul from, shamanic cultures. And from there, like realized like, oh, anytime, like if I want to go into nature as like a nature therapy session, sure, I'll eat a gram, so that I still have both my feet on the ground. I can talk to, my partner, whoever's there, but, I can still kind of zone out and like look at bark if I want to and have a good time. But if I'm looking to like go a deep inward journey, then I'm going to, interact with a larger dose of psilocybin, and I'm going to meditate the entire time through with that 528 hertz frequency, because that experience that I told you about before was actually where I found that. Because when I fell into my bed, we had some like music playing that just wasn't exactly conducive to like me feeling calm. And so I kind of like rushed through YouTube to find something that would allow me to like feel calm. And I just happened upon that video, and it was like the thing that guided me throughout the entire journey. And so it was so powerful. Yeah. But these experiences, I mean, they can definitely shake you up. But at that point, like, they also, in that instance of that challenge that I went through, they also helped me find the power of meditation, the power of reverence for the medicine, power of frequency healing. Like it opened up so much for me, and luckily I was receptive to what it was showing me and able to catch that message when it came through, because, those things have now changed my life. Meditating, I do it every single day. We were talking about before we hit record, like breath work, affirmations, manifestation, getting into all of this stuff. That one experience really prompted all of that for me. And it was powerful.
It's incredible. It really is. And I wanted to back up and say something too about when you mentioned ketamine and angels. There there are other ways to do it. And I got lucky to be connected with someone who has started that I already knew. And she has started a home ketamine infusion here in Austin, but I think she travels too. Her name is Sheila Grace Newsom, Newsom. And she is a doctor, but she comes to your house and she's super in touch with, I think ketamine is viewed a little differently because it's not plant-based, right? Or maybe it is way back, but anyway, but she talks about the goddess that it's connected to. She does it in a different way than a clinical setting where it was injection, but I still found it as powerful as an IV drip. Wow. And I got to do it laying in so I did a series of 3 with her where she came to my home. I mean, like my kids were home, they were downstairs and I told them, I was like, I'm going in, I'm doing this ketamine treatment. So, handle yourselves for a while.
Cook your own dinner.
Yeah. Like, and everything's fine. And I don't know if people see that as bad parenting or what, but I think it's super conscious. And I try to be open with them about my experiences. And so Sheila says prayers with you, calls in the angels. Like it was so cool to have experienced it in the clinical setting, but then to be able to do it there. And she sits right there and basically like prays and then is able to tell you afterward, oh, I saw this entity. I saw these things around you. I get chills thinking about it because she's really in touch with the medicine and it's been so powerful in her life. And so it's been really an interesting journey with that, to connect with it in a whole nother way and feel so safe. Like you said, just fall into your bed and have those, like, to be able to do that in your own space and in your own bed where you ultimately are like, okay, I am really safe here. Cause I mean, like, really, if we all die, wouldn't we rather do it in our bed? I mean,
yes,
sounds like a pretty good spot to do it. So
100%.
Yeah. So I'm sure there's the rare person that's like, no, I want to be, falling from the sky. Or
exactly.
Like, not me. So yeah, it makes what can be a terrifying experience or at least unsettling experience a lot more connected. And so there are options. I just wanted to let people know there's other options to do it. And if you feel like pursuing those, they're out there.
Hello, everybody. I hope you are all enjoying the show. I wanted to stop by and fill you in on our brand new, completely free to join Facebook community called the Highly Optimized Ceremony Circle. I imagine many of you are aware of the newest creation within Highly Optimized, which is the Connect with Cannabis program. Alex and I are having so much fun empowering health and wellness professionals with the skill set of facilitating conscious cannabis and helping them up-level their facilitation practice that we wanted to create a space where anyone could join to ask questions, receive free information on how to work with cannabis in the way we teach in the program, and be able to gain clarity around how to get the best results with their clients in order to become financially independent in their health and wellness practice. To join, hop over to the link in our Instagram bio and send us a request. It is our intention to assist as many health and wellness professionals as possible in the important work they are doing in the world. And if you are looking to join a community of like-minded individuals just like you, who are passionate about helping their clients achieve the highest quality of life possible, the Highly Optimized Ceremony Circle is for you. I am looking forward to speaking with all of you in the group, and as always, enjoy the show. Yeah, and it's so powerful because as we have this, new coming psychedelic renaissance, right, which is, similar to the one in the 60s, but what I see now is obviously, there's a lot different, of course, like kind of like the foundation is a little bit the same, right? Exploring consciousness, integrating more love into your life, these kind of things that we're talking about in the 60s. But the difference is that people are more aware of integration. There's also a lot of medical research now from Johns Hopkins and Harvard and all these different schools that are coming out and actually giving credence to, what people have been seeing within this realm for a long time. And so, this revolution has the ability to not just be a quick flash. It actually has the ability to last. One of the ways in which we can all be on the right side of history is to be able to speak about these things in the way we're speaking about them, where it's like, hey, we're not saying that you can't have fun in a ceremony, right? Like, it's just that in a ceremonial setting, you're safer because there are a lot of things that, the typical Western individual that's raised in the left brain society that we live in is not aware of when it comes to entities, when it comes to energy, when it comes to these things that are a little more qualitative in nature. Yet there are a lot of science coming out that are giving credence to these things as well. But there's kind of like a gap right now where a lot of people don't know about this research. It's not big enough. It's not getting a lot of the publicity, with regards to, entities and these kind of negative things that can happen within the medicine space. And so the way I think about it is almost like, say that, you are a knight. When you're walking around in, ancient times or whatever, you have all this armor on, right? And that's what keeps you safe. Well, when you interact with a plant medicine, you're kind of taking that armor off, which allows you to move a little quicker. But also, if you happen upon something that's negative, you don't have any protection, or you don't have the same protection you usually have, because you're opening yourself up. Having these kind of people around you are not just to be able to say, oh, I did it in a ceremony. It's actually what the ceremony gives in terms of protection, in terms of, ability to anchor into what you experience, ability in your case to have that person there who's able to like take notes for you and kind of keep track of what was happening while you were, separate from yourself. It's these kind of things that are really why I speak so heavily about using psychedelics in a ceremonial setting. It's not just because it's the in thing to do, or because I'm trying to be the latest woke person in the world. It's because, hey, I've had some experiences where, like, just recently I had to have 14 entities removed from me. And I don't know where they came from. I don't think they were from a medicine experience, because it's been a long time since I've had a experience like that. But they can pick up you in any time of weakness. So say if you're, lack of sleep and you go to an airport, or the reason I don't go to any bars, because they hang out in bars a lot, right? Like there's a reason alcohol is called spirits, right? Because it brings a lot of people around. It opens you up to negative influence from these entities that, are still stuck in purgatory, right? Or might, still have an addiction, right? Like this is one of the things that Paul Chek talks about, how a lot of these quasi-negative entities are, people that left this world still addicted to, say, alcohol, heroin, cocaine, etc. They go to where people are interacting with these substances so they can get their fix. And when people are open because they're, emotionally distraught or something like that, they have the ability to inject themselves into you. And especially if you don't have a spiritual practice, like I have these banishing rituals that I've been doing a lot more since I had those entities removed, that, are banishing things out of you and saying you have no right to be here, yada, yada, all of these things. But, if you go to any ceremony, especially in indigenous cultures, there's a reason they're doing 7 directional prayers. There's a reason they're using sage and Palo Santo. It's not just because it's a trendy thing to do. There's actually like a really big reason that they're using these things. And, for instance, like sage will allow you to clear any negative, energy out of your space. And then Palo Santo can reintegrate new energy into your space. And so then the 7 directional prayers, giving thanks to the 7 directions and allowing them to watch out for you in your experience. In mystery school, we learn how to build a temple and have the 4 archangels at each corner so that we're protected when we're even just meditating or doing something like that, or breath work. And so it's so powerful to have these things there, because not only can they have, can they keep track of what's happening and allow you to remember and get more out of the experience, but they can also keep you safe. And, I always say that within the medicine space, the most important thing is safety, because when you're interacting with these medicines, you are disintegrating from your normal life. And like you were saying, right, like when you were too far out on ketamine, it was hard to kind of have like, it wouldn't have been a big deal if you were in bed. It's like, okay, cool. I'm just laying here. There's not much to do. But then it was like, can you walk? Can you go to eat dinner? Can you do these things? It's like, luckily you had the right people around you. They were like, hey, no worries. Just hang out in the car, have fun. Right. And so you were able to have that experience not be a negative one in nature, but like, imagine if someone wasn't as experienced with you with that, and maybe their friends didn't really know what was going to happen, or maybe, their friends were driving and they did it. I mean, who knows what can happen? And so this is why it's so important to, have people around you that, understand what they're doing and understand. Like,
I was in a foreign country.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how I felt when I was doing peyote in Mexico, because, peyote for me was a very rough experience. It wasn't hard, like in terms of the mental state or anything like that. It was more just very nauseating. And it was more of just something I had to push through. And I have a very strong stomach, but, it was funny that I knew beforehand that you could purge on peyote. Like I had heard that when I read Adventures of Don Juan and whatnot. So when I go there, I had mentioned to one of the other guys there, I was like, oh yeah, I'm expecting a good purge. And he's like, oh, this isn't a purging medicine. And I was like, what? But I had no service to look up and be like, no, this isn't true. So that was like one of the last things I heard before I went into the experience. So here I am nauseated, and all I had to do was just puke. And it was the coolest thing ever, because not only was puking completely okay, or purging, as it's called today, but not only was it totally okay, but you being a rock and roll musician will understand how metal this was. They were like, no, you got to puke right into the fire. And I'm like, you get to puke into the fire? I'm like, I wish I was able to purge. That would have been so awesome. It's like, what a cool thing to be able to do.
Yes,
and
purge
so,
into the fire.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
I was like, this is awesome. So yeah, it's like, just knowing those little things and doing your research beforehand can really help out a lot too. Because for me, it was just confusion. I was like, am I supposed to puke? Am I going to ruin it if I purge? Like, what's going on? And then all that mental chatter takes you away from the actual experience,
Yeah.
And so having that information is so powerful.
Yeah. As if there's a right and a wrong, as if there's a certain way it's done, and you better abide by the rules. It's like, no, all bets are off. Just have the experience.
Yeah. And so I'm curious for you, like, entering into sobriety, which I'd love to get into in terms of like some of the story behind that with Justin and everything like that. But I'd love to, I guess we'll start there actually. Like, tell us a little bit about why you decided to practice sobriety at this time in your life. And then we can move into like, what you've gained from it, and kind of like for anyone listening, like what some tips you have are for people that are looking to enter a sobriety period in their life.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that last round of ketamine was a catalyst for this. I knew that things needed to change with him, and everything was coming to a head. And so I just was asking, show me what I need to see, show me what I need to see. That was my big intention. And I got a lot shown. Like, our whole relationship fell into upheaval, and for the best, obviously, for the best, right? He went to rehab, and I had to just face a lot of my own codependency and things like that. So as this year progressed, I started to really take a look at myself, and he's fully sober. And I started to say, okay, why am I not? Why do I still have a drink here and there, or whatever it is? And I had already been leaning into more of this. I give myself a lot of time, or what I think is a lot of time, between ceremonies for integration. And I just thought, what am I resisting? And so that was an interesting space to explore. And, here I am telling you that before every psychedelic journey or ceremony, I basically had tears, and how hard that is for me to push through. But some of the sober experiences are proving to be the same way, and to push me into these spaces too. And every day I have to lean into like, okay, why are you thinking you want this? Can you handle it today? That's been really surprising for me. And part of why I did it is because A, I've got a partner who's doing it, and so it's easy. But B, I've never done it. And why have I never done it?
Yeah.
Not since I was a child. And really, I would say I started drinking around 14 or 15 and have not really put it down. Yes, for 9 months plus when I was pregnant and had a child 2 times. And so, even then, I still had a drink every now and then, not really during pregnancy, I guess, but afterward I did. And so I have to really just go, why not? What am I scared of? And so that's been really interesting. And a few weeks ago, we got invited to a play party for a conscious kink community. And a friend of mine, Kimmy Ann, she's a dominatrix, and I'll be doing a podcast on this with her in the coming weeks. And I had to face that play party sober. And it was something that was way out of my comfort zone. And I didn't know what I was doing or getting into. I didn't know what it was going to be like. I trusted her, and her partner, Casey. But I still was so scared. And doing it sober just added this other layer that made me fall apart. I cried like was a basket case all day. You would have thought I was taking a hero dose that night, like from my behavior. Justin and I even had fights because he was like, "You're acting crazy." Basically, he didn't say that, but it was implied, and I knew I was like. But at the same time, I still showed up and pushed myself, and I ended up having an incredible time, an incredible experience with a very conscious community that was sensual, tasteful, amazing. We had integration time afterward. It was so conscious and so cool. And he and I both ended up having heart orgasms for the next 2 to 3 days.
Yes.
And I was like, wow, I didn't see this coming at all. And if I hadn't been sober, would I have gotten the same experience Probably not. And so, I mean, I can't say for sure, but probably not. I might
Mm,
think my senses would have been, I don't know, I just would have been in a different
altered.
frame of mind, altered.
Yeah.
And so I was able to really have a full experience and experience that heart orgasm, that heart opening feeling that I can still, like, as I'm talking about it, I can summon that. I can feel it right now. And
Yes.
so that was really a moment for me where I was like, "Ugh, gosh, there's so much to learn here." And so I'm proud. I should have counted the days of sobriety since my last drink, but it was in April. And so his is several hundred days and mine is, yeah, since April. And so I have to just constantly ask myself, why do I miss it? What do I want? What am I looking for?
Hmm.
What's underneath that desire? And so that's been an interesting challenge to pick up in someone who likes to challenge herself. So,
Yeah.
and really just cutting out the ceremonies and making every day a ceremony, making
Yes.
life a ceremony, making life more intentional, making life a psychedelic in itself, as you talk about.
Yeah. And it's so powerful because, especially in a situation like you guys were in, when you're in, a conscious kink type scenario, if you're on a medicine, you might go too far into that realm that you're not really ready to. And you might feel completely ready, especially with something like MDMA, for instance, right? But when
Yeah,
you come out of
good
that, it could,
example.
yeah, it could lead to you feeling kind of awkward or like, oh my God, I didn't know, I wasn't really ready to do that, but I did that thing or whatever. And so I think within that realm, it's extremely
Not
important,
not only that, you'll deplete your serotonin and your brain
Yes.
chemicals. Sorry to
Yes.
interrupt you, but yeah, you'll deplete those brain chemicals. So your after effects during the next couple of days are not going to be optimal, and
Yes.
you're going to have to take your 5-HTP or whatever you do.
Yeah.
And instead, we were just literally high for days.
Yeah. You had the afterglow, and
Yeah.
it's so cool because what I understand about sobriety, in practicing for myself, because when I first got into this, so like I said on your podcast, I took a 3-month break from everything. Like
Hmm.
at that point, I wasn't really drinking caffeine. Now I have cacao every day, which is a small amount of caffeine, but I literally took a break from everything. I've never been a
Wow.
drinker, but cannabis was my main thing. But I also took kratom off at that point because I wasn't podcasting yet. I always use it for podcasts, but I took a 3-month break from everything. And what I realized in that was that what I've found is that every time that I'm yearning, for something like cannabis on a weekday when I don't interact with cannabis, and I find myself like reaching for it, right? Or wanting it, or I find myself wanting a second cup of cacao instead of just one, right? Or any of these things,
Oh,
or even wanting to hit the gym for a second time that day, right? Because again, addiction can be in anything, but I think there's something underneath that I'm looking to avoid feeling. And what really clicked for me was I heard this coach who's an 8-figure coach. She coaches people on how to become 8-figure, people. And so she was saying, you want to know why I make more money than other people? And, people were like, why? And she's like, because I'm willing to feel more than other people. I'm willing to feel it all. And in that moment, my brain clicked into like, oh, sobriety equals feeling more
wow.
equals more success. And so that was when I was able to actually go, oh, this is why I'm choosing to practice sobriety in my weeks. And also sometimes I'll take a month off from cannabis and everything and do it, throughout my life. But especially that 3-month first initial break about 3 years ago, that really allowed me to sit in and be like, no, this is why I'm practicing sobriety, because I want to train myself to feel everything and see it all as happening for me. And I think that the great part about that is that if we understand the process of making silver, there's a process where they take the silver and they put it over the hottest part of the fire in order to purify it. And I think that when we face these challenges in our life, those times where we want to reach for a drink, we want to reach for a joint, we want to reach for a second cup of cacao or another workout or any of these things, it's because we're being held
For
over a
your
certain,
phone.
yes, or your phone. Oh my God.
Mhm.
Yeah. You're being held over a hot part of the fire. And I think that if you're able to recognize that and go, oh, and actually cognitive shift yourself into thinking, oh, actually, no, if I choose to give into whatever this is, whatever this feeling is, I can actually move forward in life rather than escape from it. And then I just have to face it again. Because here's the thing, right? It's a slippery slope because if you choose to numb out and reach for that drink or do that thing, well, that feeling's just going to come again. And what are you going to do when it comes up again? You're probably going to reach for a drink again or a joint again or any of these things. And so this is why it's so important for me to go through the weekdays, which are my most, prone to stress times, completely sober, because then I'm able to actually go, okay, how well am I doing at actually being able to feel everything? And again, correlation doesn't equal causation necessarily, but since I've been doing that, I've had insane amount of success very quickly. in business, also with my own personal relationship to myself, with Rachel and my romantic partnership, with all of my friends, with who I guide and connect with cannabis, like helping people understand specifically with cannabis that like, hey, this plant is not meant to be used every day in a long-term fashion. Of course, if you're training to be a shaman or something, or you have a week where you're like, this is my 1 week per year where I get into creative mode and I'm going to smoke for 7 days in a row. I'm not going to say that's inherently or objectively bad, but, for people that are getting into just like, well, like me, for instance, like, oh, I've been interacting with cannabis daily for, 8 years and just never really thought about it. Being able to take that break, it is like unbelievable how much you start feeling and how much it literally feels like you took MDMA just in a sober state of reality. Like you're listening to the music, you're crying. You're like, why am I crying? I have no idea. You're having these full blown download experience. I mean, it is a straight up psychedelic experience in and of itself. That's why I love sobriety so much. And I also love my plant medicine ceremonies a couple times a year when they happen, sitting with cannabis when it feels right. But I love all the shades. And I think that if you can choose to love sobriety and really tune into that, then you're going to really be able to choose to love your plant medicine experiences more when you go back to that, or at any point in someone's life where they feel like they want to sit with those medicines, because you're going to understand like, no, I really love my sober reality already. So I'm not running from that. Similar to in a relationship, what's better, a power couple dynamic where you guys want each other, but you don't need each other, or a codependent relationship where you feel like you literally need them. It's like, in a Hallmark movie, it might be cute to say, I need you. But like, if someone is literally telling you that like without them, they would die, or without you, they would die in their life, the romance leaves pretty quickly, right?
It's good. It's good as a song lyric, but let's leave it at that. Otherwise, you're like, someone actually said that to you. You'd be like, no, pass. You know what? I'm really glad you said that. I think that day to day, I have lost sight a little bit of really just loving the sobriety. And I think that that's a really good takeaway for me from this podcast, is really just loving that as its own experience. And I'm going to implement that more. I think I have, and I've appreciated it, but I don't know that I've really like said, I love it. And even saying that is kind of a wild thing, isn't it? It's kind of I mean, like that's almost wilder than saying you love a psychedelic. I mean, it's wild because you just go, what? Like, that's like, right? So, I mean, that's a really, what's the word? Not groundbreaking,
profound or anything.
Yeah, it's just counterculture. Like it's a counter.
It is.
I feel like it's like a really counter, outside the box type of thing to embrace and say and love.
Yeah.
So I don't know, get wild.
It's so fun, because, I think that what I've realized is that now when I interact with plant medicines, my favorite part of the ceremony is when it hits and then when it leaves, because I'm so excited to get into that realm, but I'm also just as excited to leave it and get back to normal reality where I can where I can go buy watermelon and actually know how to have a conversation with a cashier, right? Like when I can drive a car and go to any place exactly. And go to any place I want in the world. Like those things are psychedelics in and of themselves, but I didn't appreciate them until I actually learned to love my sober reality as much as I love these altered states. And I think that if we can do that, we can enter this power couple dynamic and really allow, our plant medicine experiences and our sobriety to both be psychedelic in nature. And I think that's so powerful.
Yes. That's so cool.
Yeah.
I love it.
Well, Amy, this is amazing. I can't believe we already went through an hour. I want to make sure I give people an opportunity to hear where they can find you, where they can find the show. Of course, we'll link it all in the show notes, but I'd love for you to verbally state it beforehand.
Yes, please just go to my website, amyedwards.com. You can join my newsletter, or you can find the show at the Amy Edwards Show. And of course, you have been a guest, and I just loved our episode so
good.
much. I am so grateful to have met you. And I learned so much from our conversation. So thank you again. I'm really easy to find too. On Instagram, you can connect with me at Real Amy Edwards, or on TikTok. I have a TikTok called The Magic Babe.
Beautiful. And I got one last question for you, Amy. And this is
sir.
Right? So let's say someone listened to our conversation that we had and they're extremely excited to explore psychedelic medicines in their life. What would be the one piece of advice that Amy Edwards would suggest to allow them to use the proper discernment in choosing whether or not these medicines are right for them in their life?
I think trusting that they come along for a reason. If you have to push, if you have to seek it out, if it's difficult, I'd say pay attention to those things. Pay attention to your own flow. And if something just doesn't feel right, just honor that. It's okay, even if you're right there. I think I've had times when in hindsight, I thought, I probably should have paid better attention to some signs there. So that said, I think that, honoring yourself and honoring what comes your way. And if something does present itself and it's very scary, maybe that's there for a reason. And maybe you can say yes. And my first time with Bufo was very, very, very scary for me. Mm-hmm. And I was with people I trusted, though, and I knew it was presenting for a reason and that I had work to do. So I went ahead and said yes, and I got through it. And then when it was over, or so I thought, the two women said to me, "We don't think you went far enough, and we think you need to do it again right now, and we have time." And I was horrified because I thought I did it. And yet I sat there and I cried and I did it again, and I went further. And my ego fell away, and it was the work that I needed to do. So you're just going to be put in situations where you trust the flow one direction or another. And I think getting more in touch with your intuition through your own daily practices can really guide you to trust those moments.
I agree wholeheartedly with that statement.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. I didn't know where I was going with it. So I just went with it.
It's perfect because, I think a lot of people right now are falling into like psychedelics are cool, and everyone's doing them, so I'll like them. But being able to actually like tune in and ask yourself, like, am I really having to work to go find these right now? And if so, why? Because in my experience, the times in which I've had the best experiences are when it kind of just happens and I tune into it and I go, no, this feels right. And I wish I could speak to like what this feeling is, but when you get it, right? It's a heart feeling. It's not a mental construct of logic that brings you to a psychedelic.
No, something in you says yes. And like that time with Bufo, I just knew my whole ego was like, no. And then my body was like, you have to do this right now. So just here we go.
I love that. Okay, guys, when Amy and I first met just over a month ago, when I went on a podcasting tour down in Austin, Texas, we immediately hit it off. And after doing an amazing swapcast on both her podcast, The Amy Edwards Show, and my other podcast, The Highly Optimized Podcast, we both knew we wanted to dive back in on this show to explore the deep rabbit hole of psychedelics, plant medicines, and all of the corresponding subjects that go along with these realms. Amy is truly a jack of many trades and is living proof that when one practices the concept of integration alongside their plant medicine and psychedelic use, the ability to unlearn all of the limiting beliefs, programs, and patterns standing in the way of living the most fulfilling life possible is not only a potential, but one that is able to be achieved at a level that is much more consistent and is one that can ultimately lead to our experience of life as a whole becoming psychedelic in nature long after our experiences with these medicines have been completed. My hope with all of you who tuned into this episode is that you reflect and inquire as to what your goals are with these medicines and pick up integration techniques that resonate with you, as I firmly believe that integration may look drastically different from person to person. And by exploring the many different techniques for integration available, you can ensure that integration is a fun step in the process of your medicine work rather than something that feels like homework. For anyone looking to get in touch with Amy, find her podcast, and stay up to date on all of the amazing content she is creating, make sure to check out the show notes, where I will be listing all of the ways you can get in touch with her today. Amy, thank you so much for being such an amazing example of integration in action, for sharing your time, wisdom, and experience with the listeners and me on the show today, and for being such an amazing source of inspiration for me and countless others in the world to charge their batteries off of. And until next time, my friend, may your journey be smooth and full of light. Aho.
Yay! Aho!